This episode of Planted is brought to you by Pax Labs.
The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Pine. I'm Sara Pine, your host, and today I have the honor of having Congresswoman Dina Titus from the great state of Nevada on the show. She is the co-chair of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, and I was fortunate enough to have met her right when she was working so hard on getting legalization and medical use passed in Nevada many years ago. So wonderful to see you, Congresswoman. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to be reconnected with you because that was a good while ago that Nevada was doing this, and I wanted to see how y'all were doing it in other states, so we got it right.
Yeah, you did. And it's one of those things where I feel like instead of reinventing the wheel, seeing what everybody's doing, seeing what works, what maybe needs a little bit more work is like a huge part of the process, right?
No question about it. And different states do it in different ways. And we visited California, Arizona, Colorado, and then Nevada has come with its own version, but all learning from each other's mistakes and advantages.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dig into that, I'd love to ask you the question I ask all of my guests. What was your first cannabis experience?
Well, I went to college during the 60s, so cannabis was prevalent during those times. But my real association with it came as a Nevada state senator. Now, there was an initiative in Nevada to do medical marijuana, followed then by recreational, then by now we have lounges. But in my district, there are a number of small businesses that are dispensaries. You've got the VA hospital and veterans who are concerned about this issues. The university is here, wants to look at studying it. So it's a big part of my constituency. And I'd be irresponsible if I didn't see that as a cause I needed to work on in Congress.
Absolutely. There are so many benefits to this. And I feel like you were really on the cusp of pushing this forward, like getting people to understand not only the medicinal opportunities, especially for people, a lot of our veterans have benefited extremely with this, being able to forego other harmful pharmaceuticals like opiates or benzodiazepines, things like that. But also just the sheer educational opportunities and the employment opportunities and especially with small businesses, because as we know, those are the foundations of our states.
Oh, you summed it up quite well. And that's what I've been trying to do. The caucus that I co-chair and the different associations that now exist that promote cannabis use, their first task is to educate and then to advocate, because a lot of people may still have the old prejudices or the old knowledge about the harmful effects and don't know what the positive effects are, whether it's for a community that gets tax revenue, whether it's a veteran who gets some relief from PTSD or a child with epilepsy, and the small business side of it. It's not just a little head shop with an electric poster. It's an industry. You hire chemists and chefs and business managers. It employs a lot of people in my district. So in all those ways, it's kind of a new world that we need to let people know about.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that you're really excited about that you're seeing in your state right now?
Well, I think the whole move to having lounges will be something interesting, because the way it is now, if you come here and you buy some cannabis at a dispensary, where are you going to smoke it? Can't smoke it in hotel rooms, can't smoke it out on the street. If you don't live here, what are you going to do? So I think that maybe the lounge scene will evolve in a way that kind of fills that gap. You have a very active regulatory commission here in the state that keeps a handle on how all this works. You've got a think tank center at the university that's very much engaged. And, we have some of the largest cannabis conventions come to Las Vegas. And so all of those things combined, I think, make this a real hub for the industry and where it's headed.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in MJ BizCon this last winter, and between us and Amazon, we took over the city, I think.
Well, you were right in the heart of my district, so thank you for coming.
Oh, absolutely. And, on that note, Las Vegas is a major cannabis tourism destination. How is federal prohibition impacting Nevada's ability to fully capitalize on this market?
Well, the federal government is behind the states in every way. The states have taken the initiative and pushed this policy forward. I think right now we need good banking laws so that our businesses can take advantage of the tax breaks and the banking rules and the advertising rules, credit cards that any small business can. I think if you had that, that would help the industry move forward, and it wouldn't be where you have to just hide the money under the bed, or you don't report it. It's not as easy to regulate. So I think if we could get the federal government to catch up with the states with a fair banking law, take some of the stigma off of marijuana, look at rescheduling or descheduling, both of those would address the tax issue. So all of those kind of business related things would help the industry grow, not just in Nevada, but all across the country where it now is legal, which is about a third or 2/3 of the states if you're looking at recreational and medical.
Oh, and you brought up a good point, descheduling and rescheduling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we look at rescheduling, if we did it to Schedule 3, the thing that worries me about that is, Xanax is under Schedule 3. We don't see Xanax dispensaries on corners.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the nuances between descheduling and rescheduling and what that would mean for our industry, especially with opportunities for smaller businesses? Because I know the industry is very nervous about rescheduling because they feel like it'll serve some of the larger MSOs and pharmaceutical adjacent companies more so than small business.
Well, I support descheduling. I mean, I think you could easily do that, and it doesn't belong in the same category as heroin, for example. If you descheduled, you could regulate it just like you do alcohol, and that would certainly be appropriate and sufficient. I don't think you're going to get to descheduling. You had Trump talking in Florida during the campaign, at least about rescheduling, and that process had started under President Biden. Now, under Mr. Cole, who has been appointed by Trump, that's been kind of put on hold even to reschedule. So I'd like to get to descheduling, but that is probably down the road. The advantage of rescheduling is it takes care of that tax issue, because it would no longer be an illegal substance that if you do business with that, you can't get some of those tax breaks that other small businesses have. But now I agree with the fear that Big Pharma will swoop in here, but I'm not sure that Big Pharma wouldn't swoop in if it was descheduled, because then they'd see this as another profit center, and they could have the advantages of scale when it comes to packaging and selling and marketing and all of those things that might hurt small businesses.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think that's one of the things that, we're having challenges with here in California is that, we're having large extinction events because it's very hard for our small businesses to thrive here. And if you go up to the Emerald Triangle, which used to be a thriving community, their downtowns had lots of stores, art shops. They actually were really well known for having an excellent education system. And, now we're seeing kind of ghost towns. I mean, it's gotten really depressed here. And one of the things that I'm actually the vice chair of the Cannabis Advisory Committee for the state. And we're looking at ways that we can uplift and support these small businesses, because they are the backbone of us. We are only as strong as our most vulnerable communities. And so we're seeing a very large illicit market that is coming out of this because people are trying to survive. We also were seeing a lot of companies that were doing both cannabis and hemp, but now that we've changed our laws in California around hemp, that's shut a door, which to me worries me that there will be people out of desperation going even more so into the illicit market. What are you seeing in the landscape in Nevada around things like that?
Well, some of the original dispensaries have closed because they didn't turn out to be the big profit makers that they had anticipated. The first notion was once marijuana goes legal, everybody's going to buy it. They're going to go away from the illegal market to the legal one. Now, some of that happened, but like any small business, it's expensive to get something up and going. you've got payroll, and you got the power bill, and you got the rent, and you've got the security, all of those things that have to come out of whatever it is that you take in. So when you have it kind of proliferate, that's good in one way, but bad in another, because there's so much competition that your client base goes down. So I know that is a problem. So how do you help those small businesses so they can operate just like any other small business, be treated fairly, get the same tax and banking advantages that any small business gets? And I think that'll make a difference. Another thing is getting the word out that where dispensaries exist, crime has gone down, not up. And that's people think, oh, there goes the neighborhood if you open up a dispensary. But that's the opposite of what statistics show because of the security associated with those dispensaries. So that's another way to kind of help get the word out so that communities or neighborhoods or downtown business districts don't flee if a dispensary comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. As a co-chair of the Cannabis Caucus, what's your most immediate legislative priority to move the needle on for federal cannabis reform this year?
Well, there are several bills that have been introduced and some are pending. The caucus has got 4 co-chairs, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and it's very varied. You've got me coming from a community where it's such a major economic driver. You've got Ilhan Omar, who's always looked at it as kind of a social justice issue. One of the Republicans is a former prosecutor and sits on the Ways and Means Committee, so he will be able to be an advocate on the policy of tax policy. And then you have Brian Mast from Florida, who's very conservative, but he's a veteran, and so he sees it from that standpoint. So we're coming at it from all different angles. I have a bill to take some of the barriers off of universities so they can do research, so we can get that information that we need. There's another bill by Mr. Nadler that would like to take away charges of people who did things that are now legal. And why do you leave those charges in place? That's a justice judiciary bill. We've got a bill that's the banking bill that had been carried by Ed Perlmutter from Colorado. He's no longer there, but we are picking that up. A veterans bill so the VA can at least talk about this. Right now, doctors are prohibited from talking about it. And then you've got one that's called a 2.0, and that's to say that the federal government can't intervene with what states have done. Now, that's always been kind of a wink and a nod, depending on who the attorney general was, but that would be put in statute. So you can't have the Justice Department coming into a state and arresting somebody perhaps for doing something that's legal. Now, those are bills. Whether they move or not will be tougher. But we're also looking at the appropriations process. And we got the language in the Judiciary Committee appropriations bill saying that the Justice Department couldn't interfere with medical marijuana. And we got the language in the Senate version of the Veterans Bill saying that now doctors can at least talk about it, not prescribe it, and VA's not going to cover it, but at least it's on the table so you have some sense of what your options are. So you go whichever way you can, regulatory, appropriations, legislation, we're covering all the bases.
I think it's wonderful that you're not forgetting medical. It's so important. As somebody who's a cancer survivor and an educator, I find that I do trainings with healthcare professionals with Kaiser and UCSF, and I teach at universities. And so the healthcare providers that come to classes, they're always very curious because I hear a lot from their patients and they want to be able to help and have the knowledge about drug interactions. And also when I work with doctors that their pain medicine is their specialty, they really want to help people not have to be on these harmful pain medications that can be very addictive. And with benzodiazepines, studies have shown that extended use can actually add to the problem of dementia. So I'm wondering, as we start to evolve, if we'll be able to see more opportunities to support the patients and healthcare professionals throughout this.
Well, you're so right about that. A couple of things. Veterans, the VA used to just give you an opioid, here, take this and go down the road. Whereas we've seen that marijuana has a positive impact on pain management and on PTSD. But that gets back to the point that you need good research. because research in the past has been limited to a little ratty supply out of the University of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't very reliable. Plus, the emphasis of that research was on finding the bad effects, not the good effects. And that's a whole different kind of matrix. So we need that research so that doctors will know how drugs interact or what might be a consequence down the road or a side effect, that sort of thing. Information really is the key. And I think we cannot ignore the medical marijuana side. We can't put that aside, because if you go to any dispensary, it's not just a bunch of young people wanting to get high. You find seniors and people who have medical conditions who really do need this, who are in there buying cannabis of one sort or another to help with whatever their malady might be. And that's something else people probably don't realize. Children with epilepsy, we've seen that it's made a difference there. So some of the best stories are told by the people who do use it for medical purposes.
You know it the moment it hits. That weight, that presence, that shift. Power you can feel. Introducing PAX 4, the next generation in dry herb vaporizers and the most powerful device PAX has ever created. Engineered for heavy clouds and high potency, 4 delivers dense vapor, fast onset, and real intensity, all without combustion. No burn, just pure controlled power from your flower. 4 precision heat modes that let you dial in your experience. Quick, high-impact hits or longer, fuller sessions, all in a device that's light in the hand, heavy on performance. And with fast USB-C charging and a redesigned oven for easier cleaning, 4 is built for real life, ready when you are, session after session. Because true power isn't about smoke, it's about how it feels. And for listeners of Planted, get 20% off PAX 4 with code PLANTED20 at PAX.com. PAX 4, power you can feel. Available starting March 3rd on PAX.com and at selected retailers.
Absolutely. We've seen a lot of issues around the Farm Bill. So there are people in cannabis who understand that hemp and cannabis should be working together because the sheer lobbying efforts would make a world of change. But we're also seeing a lot of divisiveness. And like here in California, I understand that, part of the issue that we've had always has been youth access and policy. Well, the biggest issue now with youth access has been the accessibility to hemp that's intoxicating. And for me personally, and this is just my personal opinion, the synthesizing of cannabinoids to make them euphoric in hemp, I think is the wrong way to go. But I do support hemp products, and I think that they should all be available. It's just that with cannabis, I feel like we're almost over-regulated and hemp is almost under-regulated. If we could find a sweet spot in between and join forces, I feel like there's so much more that we can do. But what are your thoughts on the Farm Bill, what we're seeing in hemp, and what do you hope to see in the future with that?
Well, I agree with you. I think there's a happy medium. When hemp was put in with cannabis and regulated that way, they said, no, we don't have this. It's not as potent, and it's not, the contents don't make you as stoned as marijuana does, and it should be regulated separately. So they took the two, separated the two. And that's good. Hemp uses a lot less water when it's grown. I think they should be growing it instead of alfalfa in rural Nevada, frankly, because of that. But what happens is then you have intoxicating hemp that's able to get around all the regulations that have been put in place. And then stores that sell intoxicating hemp are in competition with the cannabis dispensaries and don't have to meet nearly the same standards. So I think this is something that needs further investigation. I think we need to figure out what we should do at the federal level and take a look at how the Farm Bill runs contrary to maybe a judiciary bill or an appropriations bill was different from the Farm Bill itself from out of the Department of Agriculture. So I think that's something that's still very much a frontier that we need to address.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to see what'll happen in Kentucky because traditionally they grew so much hemp, and I would really love to see that along with that beautiful bluegrass.
Well, hemp is used for many things besides the intoxicating impact. You can make clothes out of hemp, for example. And the point you make there goes back to what I was saying earlier about the states being on the front line. I was just reading today that some legislation is being introduced in the Texas legislature about moving medical marijuana, I think it is, forward. So much is going on out there that the federal government needs to catch up with. But one good thing is the more states that do this, the more public pressure will be put on members of Congress. So it won't just be Democrats doing this. You'll find more people perhaps joining our caucus or signing on to some of our bills.
Yeah, because it's interesting when people look in from the outside, they always think, oh, it's the Democrats that are pushing this. But as we've seen through different political cycles, it's actually gone back and forth, because in the 80s, the Republicans were very supportive of it. And I've had Michael Steele on a couple of times, who's a total delight. But he's said in the past that if Republicans, there are a lot of Republicans that not only support it, but actually partake. And if we had more truthful conversations about that, we probably wouldn't be having as many impasses as we are from the policy side.
Well, that could be true. I don't know which of my colleagues go out for a joint occasionally. I'm sure there probably are some. But, you just frame your arguments differently. With Republicans, it's all about the business side of it. And also about if they, if you support the business, it's also states' rights. Different states have done different things. Now, those are traditionally Republican issues. More the social justice kind of issues are Democratic issues. But you put the two together, and cannabis is a perfect combination of the whole spectrum.
Discover the power of Yorma's Choice CBD products. When we chose a sober life, we searched for the best CBD to manage our chronic pain. In Raywood, Kentucky, the home of Bickett and Boone, we found the perfect solution. Yorma's Choice is a range of topicals, tinctures, bath salts, and gummies. Choose Yorma's Choice for pain-free living. Shop now at furpeaceranch.com. FURPEACERANCH.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and something I wanted to tell you about the hemp side, you were talking about it's not just euphoric, and that's so true, because we can use it. There are so many industrial applications, nutrition, but also I've been speaking with a researcher in the Czech Republic that is actually turning hemp into shelf-stable plasma.
Really? Well, that is interesting. Well, see, that goes back to the need for research. If you could do some valuable research, no telling what the possibilities are.
Absolutely. And when I think about something like that in areas where, refrigeration isn't the norm, and especially in cases with people like, or groups like Doctors Without Borders, like how amazing would it be that this plant that's been stigmatized for so long is actually the key to creating some greater equity in healthcare as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing story.
What are your thoughts about regulating intoxicating hemp?
Well, there's not been a lot of emphasis on it. So like I said, it's a frontier. We need to figure out how we can do it, if we're going to do it at the federal level, or we're going to leave it to the states to do it. And then if you leave it to the states, you get a whole patchwork, kind of like you do with cannabis. So I think that's yet to be seen. Something else that's coming along that I hope doesn't kind of overshadow our arguments about cannabis are psychedelics. You are seeing the kind of looking at legalizing psychedelics up in some of the northwestern states. Even in Congress, some people are talking about it. Before we jump to that, let's not leave cannabis behind. Let's get that resolved, and then you can talk about psychedelics too. So it's yet another issue along this whole same palette.
Absolutely. And I think with psychedelics, as much as they can be incredibly helpful, there is a difference between that and cannabis as well, because cannabis, we know from experience that unless it was adulterated, there's been no deaths from cannabis use. However, with psychedelics, we have to be really a little bit more mindful and careful. And it's not, I see people jumping from cannabis into psychedelics, I'm like, okay, so educate yourself. Like, it's not the same. Like, we have to be careful with it. I'm always joking, and that's why we can't have nice things, because people will just kind of dive in. But another thing I wanted to ask you was, with intoxicating hemp beverages, which I think cannabis beverages, hemp beverages, it's a really interesting thing because people use products that they relate to the format. And I've seen a lot of people be turned on to cannabis through beverages because it's a format that they're familiar with. It's friendly. And both Georgia and Minnesota have hemp beverages that are available in bars and in restaurants. And I think it's a really interesting case study to see how an environment can have both alcohol and cannabinoids in the same place successfully, because we often worry about, what happens when those two meet in a social setting and how will people be affected. But as we see that they aren't having a lot of issues with it. And in Nevada, when we have the casinos, it's like you can smoke cigarettes in the casinos, you can have beverages. But as we grow and kind of see how cannabis and alcohol can coexist together, do you see possibilities of maybe even like a cannabis or hemp beverage being available in a casino?
Well, I don't know about a casino, but I think some of these lounges that they're talking about developing, you might see it go down that path. And, if anything is successful when it comes to entertainment and tourism, the gaming industry is going to take a hard look at it. As far as alcohol, when we first legalized marijuana, there was a real concern by the alcohol, the beer and wine industry, that people would now go to marijuana as opposed to, take a joint instead of take a drink, and that there would be competition there. And so they wanted to see it regulated and distributed in a way that didn't economically impact them. I think gaming is the same way. Gaming has got to understand that if you get stoned, you still want to go for entertainment, eating, and gambling, and because that's their the milieu, I guess you could call it, and they don't want to see it to just take away from that interest. Are you still going to want to have fun? Are you still going to want to go out on the strip? And so it becomes an economic interest as well as a scientific interest.
Yeah, I wish I could tell them not only will they want to go out, but they won't trash your bathrooms. We're much more polite when we're slightly buzzed rather than totally inebriated.
Could be.
As we wrap up, what are some things that you're super excited and hopeful about in the future? And I just want to preface this with just thank you so much for all of your hard work on this, because I know that you've done so much to push this forward, not only in your own state but nationally.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm kind of the cannabis queen, if I can be so modest to call myself that here in Nevada. But we've had some supporters. Tick Segerbloom at the county level, he has been very strong pushing this whole notion of the lounges. So it's been a collaborative effort, state, local, federal government. I'm an optimist, or I wouldn't be in this business. And when Trump said on the campaign trail in Florida, when they were doing the initiative there, that he supported descheduling or rescheduling, I was very optimistic. I thought, well, now during this new Congress, maybe we can get some things done. But since he's backed off of that and his appointments are not very supportive of anything dealing with cannabis, that's been discouraging. But we're not giving up. I mean, we've got a good caucus. Other members are joining it. It's bipartisan, like I described. It's very diverse. And so we'll continue to push that legislation. Once we get through this big, bad BS bill that we're trying to deal with and the appropriations process, the next half of the term, I think you'll see more policy issues. And that's when we'll have a better chance to move some of this legislation.
Yeah. And for people who are listening, who are concerned about what's going on both in their states and on the federal level, what advice do you give them?
Well, I tell them to listen to your show is what I would tell them, because it's, like I said earlier, it's so important to educate people, and then it's easier to advocate for the issue. And having you talk about from your own personal standpoint, the medical advantages, having guests on who can talk about it in a rational, not emotional way, you're able to get the information out. And the more people know, the more they tend to be supportive. 70% of people in this country, Democrats and Republicans, support legalized marijuana. And so we just have to play on that And so have me on your show again. I would love to come back.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. And for those of you out there listening, remember, you have more power than you give yourselves credit for.
That's true.
It's time to let your representatives know that you contribute to society, you pay taxes, you use cannabis, and most importantly, you vote.
That's right. Exactly. So thank you for sending that message.
Absolutely. And Congresswoman Titus, if people want to reach out to you, see what you're doing, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. You can call my office in Washington. You can just stop by and say hello. We have a cardboard cutout of Elvis outside our door, so we were real easy to find. You can spot the Vegas office anytime. But we welcome that. We appreciate hearing from people about it. You know, it's interesting. There was a long line outside of a dispensary back during the election cycle. And I'm always out there on the hustings. I thought, well, this will be great. I'll just go shake hands down this line, maybe get some votes. Well, it turned out, unfortunately, most of those people were from out of state who were just here as tourists. We still got the message out. So wherever you're from, we welcome hearing from you.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And you are welcome back anytime, Congresswoman. It's so good to see you again.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.